everybody, welcome to the channel. This is Business Studies Paper 1, Guide to Question Approach from a student's perspective. I am a completed student of Business Studies who has very recently finished their papers, and now it is my turn to give back to the community. This video aims to teach you how to accurately respond to every type of question that Business Studies Paper 1 can throw at you. If you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. That really tells us that what we're doing, you like it and you want to see more of it. It also helps us grow the channel so that we can keep on making more videos like this. Anyways, let's dive straight into it. Business studies can be a tricky paper, especially paper 1. There is a lot that you have to know. You have to have every nook and cranny down. The basics are right here in front of you. These are the 4 types of marks that you can score throughout the paper. This should be different for every single question type. Let's start with the most simple, the knowledge mark. This is the point itself. In each and every question from A to E, you shall find one of these. It is either the easiest or the hardest to score, depending on how much you revise, because really, this is the only place you have to revise to get this point. It is the knowledge itself. Like, for example, if you say a franchise, that's a knowledge point. Let's move on to analysis. This is the effect on the business of the knowledge mark that you gave, or the consequence of the main point. For example, a franchise, what's good about that? What does that mean for the business? If the business chooses to be a franchise, what happens to it? Let's move on to the application mark. Analysis marks can be found in part C, D, and E of the paper 1. Not A and B. You'll only find them in those 3. Let's move on to the application mark. This is the mark for aligning case study material with your answer. This is one of the easiest marks to get for sure. If the case study mentions cookies or $25,000, then simply writing the word cookies or $25,000 in a correct way will give you your application mark. That's +1 of the 80 you need. It can be a single word, phrase, or a problem that the business is facing, or a number, and it is found in part C and D in this current syllabus. Just be sure that every application you give is unique for each part of the question. For example, you can't write cookies twice for both your advantage and disadvantage. That won't get you marks. Then lastly, we have the evaluation mark. This is more advanced and you don't always need it, but it's good to know either way. These are only found in the justification of part E. It is the marks you get for weighing benefits and limitations of your answers in the context of the question. That's it. That's the 4 important things you have to know. Now let's look how they are applied in each question. We will start with questions A and B, the most basic questions. Each one of these 2 is worth 2 marks, where you have to get 2 knowledge points. This is not possible without revising, so make sure you do that before diving into your papers. This is a sample question from October-November 24, variant 1.3. I'll give you some time to read through the case study. You can pause the video to go through it, but I'm going to jump straight into the question. Question A says define inflation, and question B wants us to identify 2 characteristics of a successful entrepreneur. These are very straightforward questions. There's no twist to it. Just straightforward define inflation, identify, such simple command words. You'll find other command words like outline or sometimes even calculate, but it's all the same. You give 2 knowledge marks to get your 2 marks for each question. Let's look at a sample answer that I created. Inflation, this is a rise in the price level of goods and services over time. Everything I have highlighted is where you're going to find your marks. So in this case, rise in the price level will give you 1 mark, and then over time will give you the second. If you simply state this is a rise in the price level of goods and services, you're only going to get 1 mark. The second mark lies in the second point, over time. That is how you attack the define questions. Question B is even simpler. It says identify 2 characteristics. So each characteristic will carry a mark of its own, hardworking and optimistic. Very straightforward. Let's move on to question C. This one is where you gain the first application marks in the question. You have 4 marks in total that you can score for this question type. And usually there is 2 sides that they want you to argue, or 2 ways in this case. Outline 2 ways a business plan might help Ramon. You give 1 knowledge mark for each side and application mark for each side. Application marks is again just relating your answer to the case study, like picking relevant words. In this case study, examples of application could be entrepreneur, home tutoring service, students, maths, inflation, franchise. There's so many, even startup businesses, application, or crowdfunding. It is so easy to find application. The harder part is sneaking it into your sentences, must I say. Let's look at a sample answer that I wrote. It helps enable Ramon to set targets for his startup business. Set targets to the knowledge mark that you need, and then simply the word startup business. That gives you your application. It is making it more relevant to Ramon. How will the business plan help Ramon? Not some random guy in Britain. Ramon. Ramon is dealing with a startup business or a franchise or a home tutoring service. So you have to write those words there if you want marks. Such a short sentence, that very few words will get you 2 marks, just like that. Business studies is not that tricky once you get the hang of it. Let's look at way 2. It could help him obtain bank loans, that's the knowledge mark, if he decides not to use crowdfunding, that's your application, your word from the case study. Sometimes question C won't look like this though. It is rare, but it usually happens once every paper. Among the 4 questions, usually one part C will be a list type, where it will ask you to list 4 ways instead of giving outline. In this case, it is 4 knowledge marks you're working for and no application. But that's a bit rarer. Let's move on to part D. This is a bit more difficult than the previous questions we've looked at. You're working for 6 marks, of which there are 2 sides to argue for. Explain 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage to Ramon of buying a franchise. Each side, you're working for 1 knowledge mark, an application mark again, and an analysis mark this time. To gain analysis marks, you have to give the effect or the consequence of the knowledge point that you have given. For example, if your knowledge mark was, say, a franchise, what does it mean to be a franchise? How will that help Ramon? Let's look at the examples. The advantage given is the business would operate under an already well-established brand image. That's your knowledge mark. Straightforward. And then the explanation, you include your analysis mark and application, of course. The franchise could already be well known with students. Students is the application. It is found in the case study somewhere up there. So Ramon may attract customers as a result. The knowledge mark says well-established brand image. So what does this mean for the business? So what? You have good brand image. What does that mean for you? Well, if you have good brand image, that would mean that you would be able to attract many customers. That is the gist of analysis marks. It's the effect or the consequence of the knowledge mark. Let's look at the next part. The knowledge mark is money has to be sent back to the franchisor. Ramon would have to send a percentage of his profits to the franchisor every month, making teaching math application less profitable for him, reducing his profit margins. The knowledge mark is money has to be sent back. So what does this mean? If you are having to send money to somebody every month, what does that mean for you? It means that your profit margins will be lower. That's your analysis. Once you understand these things, the way to attack the question, business studies becomes a whole lot easier. It may even be one of the easiest subjects. Alright, let's move on to the most tricky, the most difficult, I'll say, question type. Question E. This is the giants waiting at the very end of each question. It is very, very, very technical to answer. You have to know exactly what to do, and if you stray from these guidelines, you will see that you've filled up all your space but won't be getting any marks for it. The question says, do you think crowdfunding is the best source of finance for a startup business to use? Justify your answer. If it wants us to justify, that means you have to give a point for and a point against. You have to support the answer and then oppose it and then work up a conclusion, I'll say. You get 2 marks for supporting it, 2 marks for opposing it, and 2 more marks in your justification. You are able to find knowledge marks and application marks, and sometimes you can make evaluation marks in the justification. If you were to be unbalanced in this question type, for example, if you write a lot supporting it and very, very little opposing the question, you're going to get no marks. You can only get maximum 2 marks for supporting it and 2 marks for opposing it and 2 marks in your justification, not 3, 1 and 1 like that. You can't do that. 2 marks maximum. Let's look at a sample answer. You start by supporting the question. You always start by supporting it. In this case, crowdfunding allows the business owners to see the reaction of the public, that's the knowledge mark, to their business idea, which could end up attracting customers when the business opens. There's your analysis. You have supported the question and have gained your 2 marks. Next, you move on to oppose it. However, it may give competitors the opportunity to learn more about the business before it launches, which could lead to them copying ideas, so the business would be less competitive, reducing its sales. You support and then you oppose. Those are 4 marks already. Now you move on to the justification, where you get the last 2. Justification is like your conclusion. You usually pick a side and say why you have given this. It could be another advantage of what you've given. It could be a separate alternative method, or it could be the tricky evaluation. That's the 3 main types of justification you can give, and we'll go through all of them. In this case, I have given an alternative method instead that will get you the marks. An alternative method is bank loans, which would allow the full finance to be obtained much faster. This is another way. In other words, you have chosen to oppose the question. Remember, in your justification, you either oppose or support the question to get your 2 marks, then you state why. In this case, I choose to oppose it because I do think that crowdfunding is a bit ridiculous and there's better ways. In this case, I gave bank loans. That's another way to justify your answer. Let's look at yet another. Here is an alternative answer. We'll go through it from the top bottom. You always start by supporting the question. Crowdfunding does not require an initial investment, so it doesn't need any cash outflows for the business. Those are your 2 marks for supporting it. Next, you move on to oppose it. In this case, I chose to oppose it by stating another method that is better than crowdfunding. Bank loans again. However, bank loans allow for finance to be obtained much faster, and the business may enter operation immediately. Those are your 2 marks for opposing it. And again, we're working for the last 2. In this case, I chose to support the question in the justification. I say yes, crowdfunding is better because it also helps advertise the business and its motives and objectives, which could end up getting the business more customers when it opens. You can also pick from your 2 points in your justification, especially if you have gone away with picking an alternative method in the opposition part. If you have already given 2 different methods in your first answer, then you have to select one of the 2. You can't go on to pick a third one. For example, personal finance from the owner or leasing. That won't work. Let's move on to the last type. You've noticed that you haven't seen the evaluation yet? Well, here it is. I figure we've had enough of knowledge and analysis. We're going to jump straight into the justification again. Remember, we're only working for the last 2 marks here. Evaluation is when you weigh the 2 answers against each other. You're weighing your supports against your opposition and seeing which one has a greater effect or ways to solve the issues that you have given. Here my answer says crowdfunding is the best source because a new business is risky. The bank may not be willing to lend to them anyway. And even if it did, the new business may not be able to afford to repay the loan. In this case, you have looked critically at the question and noticed that it mentions a startup business. An issue of a startup business is, of course, that banks don't want to lend to them. So this is a problem for the business. You have rejected the opposition that you gave earlier. Remember, bank loans was an alternative method, so it would oppose the question. You reject this opposition and say that in fact crowdfunding is better because this alternative method may not work. And even if it did, the new business may not be able to afford to repay the loan. That is another issue of taking loans as a small business. You can see that this type of answer is a bit more advanced, but if you master it, surely business studies is going to go well for you. You'll be able to freestyle your questions, you can say, and really write what you're passionate about. And it also shows the examiner that this student knows what they're talking about. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, make sure to like and subscribe. And perhaps write in the comments what you would like us to work on next. We look through them and try to tend to the needs of the students. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.